Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have a great one for you this evening. I was lucky enough to meet a really fine gentleman at the UAP hearing. I guess I always want to say UFO because that's what it is. It's a UFO, UAP, same thing. So I met Keith in line early, and the reason he was in line early is because he heard Chris Lito and I sing that we were going to get in line early. But anyway, he's a great guy. Can't wait to talk to him. He's really involved in law enforcement and got an interesting take on this whole subject. And I'm really looking forward to speak to him. Uh, the blog this week by Charles Lear is a 1976 British UFO and humanoid encounter with paranormal overtones. So, some sad news just before the show last week. James Fox, good friend of James Fox, and myself, and many other people in the UFO world and out of the UFO world, Huffington Post, and so many other places and connections with this wonderful man, Lee Speigel, passed away just before the show started last week. I found out about it the day after. Love the guy. We became very close over the years. We're going to do something for Lee, a tribute. A whole bunch of us are getting together and just showing you the type of humor that Lee had. So we're getting together. I believe it's a tentative date of September 14th. We're going to use his regular time slot for Edge of Reality radio show over at UNX Radio, and that would be 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern on September 14th. Right now, that is a tentative date. It should be a very good tribute to him. Lots of people are going to be involved in that, and I will, tell everyone how to be able to watch that live when that does happen. It's going to be on video and audio on the station over there. So I just wanted to, the last time Lee was on, I always loved his sense of humor. And he tells this story about the UFO record album that he put out back in 1975. And I can't remember the name of it right now, but I think I have it on the clip here. But when he was putting that together, he tells a story of how that all came together. And he really did come to New York City to become a folk singer. He's very talented. He sent me some of his music, and but this is what ended up happening. And here's his little story about it. It's 3 minutes long. Here it goes.
My phone rang, and I said hello, and I heard this voice. He said, "Are you Lee Speigel?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "This is Ralph Blum. Who the hell are you? And how the hell did you get my mail?" And I'm thinking, am I in trouble here? Did I not make the right decision? My father loved what I did. But Ralph said, "What do you want?" And I told him my idea, and he said, "Well, okay, let's meet." And from that point on, we became friends. And he had connections. Their book that you just showed was published by Bantam Books. And so he knew all the people in publishing and production and marketing at Bantam. And he had friends, and I had some friends in the recording industry. So we worked it out to do a pitch to the people at CBS of the idea of letting me, with Ralph's help, contact all these people that were in his book. He gave me all their contact information so that I could start calling them and ask them if they would be interested in having me come to visit them wherever they were in the country and interview them for a vinyl documentary recording that I was going to produce for CBS. And people said, sure. And we worked out the deal so that if they bought the record album from the TV commercial we ended up having for it, if you didn't like the album or the 8-track tape, well, okay, you could send the album back to us, but keep the book, keep the Ralph Blum book as our gift.
How about
that?
Yeah.
You don't see much of that kind of stuff anymore.
No.
But it was the first time. It kind of became an instant classic in ufology it was the first time that a major recording company like CBS offered a UFO product to the public. It was the first time that a UFO documentary was presented on TV in a 2-minute infomercial. And it was one of the first UFO products that Dr. J. Allen Hynek chose that was offered for sale in the renowned Edmund Scientific Catalog at the time. And so he chose a variety of things like best books he liked, best slideshows, and mine was the only record that was offered. And it was like, wow. It just, I couldn't believe my luck of getting that far so quickly. And so, okay, I came to New York with a guitar looking for a record contract. And I finally got a record contract, but it had nothing to do with folk singing. It was about chasing extraterrestrials. Go figure.
Anyway, our good friend Lee, may he rest in peace. And so remember, September 14th, that's what the tentative date looks like. It's going to be a really nice tribute with a lot of people involved. So stay tuned for that. And one other thing, I'm going to be at MUFON, the symposium this coming weekend. So if you happen to be there and you want to look me up, our guest just went away. Hopefully he'll be right back in. So if you want to look me up, I do have a podcast UFO hat. I might wear that, but most of the time I probably won't be. But you can always email me if you're there at the symposium, martin@podcastufo.com. Here's our guest. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you.
I saw you disappear. Where did you go?
My daughter called me on the phone, the iPhone, and it disconnected us. So I told her, stop calling me since we're in the same house.
Wow, you're using an iPhone right now?
Yes, I am.
Oh my goodness, how clear is that? That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how far that technology has come. Well, thank you so much. It was a real, I felt a kinship right away when we met early in the morning in line on July, was it August? What? No, July 26th.
July 26th. Yeah. That's right. Wednesday.
Yeah, that was really something.
And the story I'd love to tell, Martin, is how I was watching you and Chris Leto the evening before the hearing, talking. You were in DC, both in DC, and you were talking about how you were expecting a large group to show up and how you guys were going to get there early. And I had already had my ticket bought, and it was supposed to arrive at 6:30. And I said, wait a second, I'm going to be late. I better get a couple hours earlier. So I arrived at 3:30 in DC. And because of that, I was able to catch up with you and the other folks who were there early and eventually get a seat. We didn't know there were only going to be 30 seats available.
I know. Well, I heard that the day before, but I said that can't be right, and it was just amazing how the line kept morphing and changing, and new people were coming in and strange people we didn't see. They certainly weren't there at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
They infilled. Yeah.
And while we were standing online, you see Representative Burchett walk by.
That's right.
Able to get and of course, Randall Nickerson was also there. He was the first person online.
Yes.
So it was amazing to see all these folks who are pretty famous in this whole effort there in the flesh.
Yeah.
And so I then I saw you, and I knew you from your podcast, obviously, and all the folks that you've interviewed, and so I think that's one of the reasons why we hit it off. I was more of what they call, I think these days, a fanboy, and I was just like, oh, can I take a picture with you?
Well, now I'm a fan of yours after looking at all that you are looking to do and did. Why don't we talk about you're involved? You have a very major involvement with law enforcement over the years, and you are looking to see how these encounters are treated. And well, right off the bat, before we go into all that, how did you feel? We haven't really talked about it, but how did you feel the hearing went? How did you feel they were treated?
I think it went tremendously well. I think the point of the hearing, it was for the general public's consumption, for the general public to become familiar with some of the issues that we're going to be dealing with in the future. And so by having these witnesses, and especially the whistleblowers, speak to the seriousness of the validity of the things that he has encountered and has reported to Congress and to the ICIG and DODIG's offices, it was really an important day. It was what I think in my head, a historic day. And I was there, like everyone else, to witness history. And what was that history? It was, if you haven't seen that the video of that hearing, go see it, because there's so much information that's covered very quickly in fleeting questions that each of the Congress people is able to sort of get out within that very limited amount of time. Everything from crash retrievals to bodies, biologics, and there were many different things that were discussed. The most important takeaway is that we have a lot of ground to cover in exposing a decades-long cover-up of huge proportions regarding financial crimes, and
Yep.
by the way, non-human intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I think one of the hooks in this whole thing that keeps people like Burchett motivated to keep pushing along is the financial part of it. That is like, hey, this money is going. We don't know where this money's going. There's billions of dollars a year that just can't be found, that get lost somehow. What's going on? And in that case, there has to be accountability. And and I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I have heard rumors that they're not too keen on putting together another hearing. Have you?
Yeah, I think at the House level, I don't think that there's the political will from the leadership of the House to go further with this conversation. I think that we're going to have to hope that the Senate comes through with their hearings, that hopefully they'll be starting that next month. But regardless of whether it is something that happens immediately or if it's rolled out over the next few months and years, this is something that's not going away. This is very much a reality in terms of the UAP issue and the massive cover-up, and some of the crimes that were committed by rogue elements within government to keep this a secret from the general public. So my stance is let's get to it. Let's get prepared. I'm an emergency planner, public safety, law enforcement. Let's not wait to react. Let's start getting prepared for whatever it is that we're going to have to deal with recognizing this NHI, dealing with the general public in a much more rational way around NHI contact, sightings, abductions, and really just understanding that just because we know more about the reality of our world and our universe doesn't mean that it's unbelievable. It's simply just knowing something new, and we will accept it eventually, and we will adapt to it, whatever it is.
So let's talk about you. How long have you felt this way, first of all? And then let's talk a little bit about your background and what made you actually pay attention to the UFO world.
Sure. I started as a police officer back in the early 90s, and I was fortunate enough to work with some really great people in different capacities. I was an undercover narcotics officer, as an internal affairs supervisor, policy and budget analyst within the police department, and I also missing person squad during 9/11, which was a very difficult
Oh boy,
assignment, of course.
Yeah.
Worked with some really incredible people to bring honor to those who had fallen, and got help from all over the country. It was an amazing time of the country coming together
Yes.
with a singular purpose, and
Mhm.
also an acknowledgement by the federal government that they needed to change the way they did business. You saw intelligence, the relationships between the agencies had to change, and did in the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. And with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, one of the things that they focused on was providing training to local and state first responders on dealing with weapons of mass destruction attacks. Our focus was on making certain that not only did we have the general public's help through campaigns like See Something, Say Something, but that our officers and other first responders had the equipment necessary to deal with those very rare encounters, which could have very high consequences. So those WMD attacks that we were worried about, the dirty bombs, and the biological, the anthrax attacks, and
Yeah.
everything in between. And so I was fortunate enough to get trained within the NYPD, working for their SWAT/heavy rescue team to deal with those types of situations, as well as medical emergencies and water emergencies and high angle rope rescue emergencies. Their emergency service unit is a very special unit prepared for everything under military attack. Anything underneath a military attack, that's what the emergency service unit deals with. And so I would train out in places like Dugway and the Nevada test site and the Anniston former chemical factory, chemical army depot. And that training was to prepare me for dealing with some very hopefully unlikely situations, but quite possible. So with all of that WMD training, it was not a difficult thing for me to understand the possibility of there being something other than what we understand here on this earth. Dealing with people. What I never really did was I never thought about it. I was sort of agnostic. It wasn't until 2017, the New York Times article,
Yeah.
Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean, and even then, I was really not so inclined to think about it until 2020. You had The Phenomenon by James Fox, and you had Randall Nickerson's The Aerial Phenomenon, and then James
Yeah.
Fox again, Moment of Contact. That's when I really started to sort of hone in on this and realize that not only is it just compelling individuals with compelling stories of some unusual situations, but that this was something that was becoming, it just sort of dawned on me that, hey, I'm in law enforcement. What are we doing about this? Then going and seeing David Grush speak, and understanding that there's a lot more than simply him speaking, him dealing with Congress and getting 40 witnesses to attest to what he found out, firsthand witnesses to non-human craft and bodies. That was really sort of an amazing revelation to actually hear him say that under oath after
Yeah.
watching him say it on TV.
Yeah, I'd like to address that while you just said that, because I'm going to put this comment up, and there's a couple or at least one or under there similar. Flapjack says, I feel Grush is similar to Lazar. Their stories line up with some things we know, but still we don't have anything concrete. It would all be, which would be nice. We have videos, etc., but show me the UFO. And I understand that thinking. Yeah, we do want to see the nuts and bolts. But I mean, should that mean that David Grush should have stayed quiet about this? And then later on down here, this person says, yes, Grush and Lazar are the same. Ridiculous. Now I'd like to address that, because there is a huge difference, in my opinion, between Bob Lazar
Yes.
and David Grush.
Yeah.
David Grush went under oath. He's risking everything. He's he could go to jail if he's found out that he's lying. Maybe the claims are extraordinary, and I understand, like, you have to be skeptic when the claims are like that. We'd really like to, as Alejandro, my friend, says, we'd like to see the receipts. Of course we would. But this is cracking the door open. This is just my opinion, but letting it be known that, to the people out there, that please do come forward. Let's hear the first-hand experiencers. That's what I'm hoping comes out of this whole thing.
Yeah, I have so much to say, and I know we only have a few minutes together, but the first thing I want to say is you and I and everybody listening is we live in an unclassified world. And what we are talking about is classified things. And none of us can speak to the veracity of any claims that someone from the classified world is saying. We just have to be patient and let the investigative process go through. So rather than waste time trying to figure out if it's true or not, let's let the authorities actually go through the process that was just created. There was no whistleblower process for this kind of information until very recently. And so David Crush is what you call an honest broker, or a authentic representative of the classified world. So we have to wait for the investigations of the classified allegations that he's made. And he's only been able to share with us the things that he's allowed to talk about. But you have to sort of key on a few things, that this is, although he's talking to us for the first time, this has been an ongoing investigation with Congress and the appropriate investigative bodies for years. And if you listen closely to the leaders of the intel, the various leaders that are out there, they are not, disregarding the whole situation. They're just being coy because they have to. They have to wait for the investigation to complete. So for those who are saying, I want to see bodies and I want to see crap, we live in an unclassified world, and there's no guarantee we're ever going to be able to see classified stuff. But what we are going to be able to do is get some sort of confirmation as to the legitimacy of what he's talking about. And frankly, everything that I've read and heard and seen leads me to believe that we have a lot more that we're going to be experiencing in the not too distant future regarding this.
I hope so. And I worry that, and maybe it's a false worry, but I worry that the umbrella of classified can be overused in a situation. I do understand when it comes to national security, there are things that should not be out there because our adversaries, could use it against us. I understand that totally. But what I'm afraid of is that, we may end up knowing very little of the classified part of this. If a firsthand witness comes forward, if they can only speak in a classified environment, how are we going to get that relayed to us, and by whom? Would it be through another hearing type of situation, or, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that we've been experiencing it, particularly within the last few years, by looking at what former elected officials have been saying, by looking at the legislation that's being passed or has been passed, by the fact that investigations have been ongoing for years about this issue, and the fact that you have a whistleblower that has come out, the first of many, talking about some incredibly fantastical claims that are fantastical because they challenge our worldview, they challenge our ideas about reality, about physics, about science, about our origins, about so many different aspects that it is a whole lot to sort of take in. And I understand the resistance to that, because when you say, they exist, well, then there are a bunch of other questions that follow.
Yes.
And that's what I think, the Robertson panel in the 50s and the Rand Corporation study and all the other things that have sort of gauged the public's ability to handle this information. I think that's where they were coming from, plus the fact that there was a Cold War going on and so many different things that sort of helped prevent us from progressing as a society with this understanding that there's more to the world than what we know. Now it's simply more to the world than what we are allowed to know. And so all that Anger, frustration should not be directed to whistleblowers, should be directed to the rogue elements within government that have been keeping and are keeping these secrets away from us, and also secrets of crimes.
Yes, yes, and there's parallels there. So I'm just putting this up here because just to remind the listeners. So Jonathan Wigand coming up on September 5th. So far, it's a go. I've asked. There's a lot of people that are contacting me about this particular guest coming up, and all I ask is that no one try to reach him, respect his privacy, and the last thing I want is for someone to contact him now and somehow make him uneasy to do the interview, which is coming up. Um, in a couple weeks, right? Yeah, just in a couple weeks. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be an interesting one. Anyone that's seen his old 2001 or 3, whatever it is, interview will understand why I'm excited about that guest.
Well, if I may,
yeah,
we look at, I'm very new to this whole UFO community, but very impassioned about it. There's so much documentation, so many historical accounts, some pictures and videos, and it's online. Places like UFOB and Eyes on Cinema, where you can see police officers and others who have had to deal with these incidents and encounters of all different types of encounters, from sightings to abductions. But what we are doing is we are simply looking at the tip of the iceberg. Because of the stigma, because there's no infrastructure for report, no formal infrastructure, there are, of course, voluntary efforts, longstanding and heroic, but they are still not a part of the official record. So we don't have data for scientists to review. And so out of the numbers of incidents that have occurred, I would think that there have been many, many times that where people have been afraid to discuss it both on the military side and also in private sector, just local communities, afraid to talk about these things because they see what happens to people who do talk about it.
That's right.
And for that matter, we are 70% as a world. We are 70% covered by water. People don't live on 70% of the planet. So
yes.
We have no idea of the frequency of incidents that are occurring with our world, with entities that are maybe coming from other places. Now the government does, and to the extent that they're able to tell the truth, then I think that it's time, and I think frankly that not just the American public, but the world is ready for acknowledgement of what they suspected and documented themselves over many generations.
Yes, yes. We were talking just a second ago there about law enforcement, and I wanted to share this. This incident was also my good friend Lee Speigel was very much involved with this particular case, and it's really fascinating. This happened in Lumberton, North Carolina, and many people have heard Lee talk about it, but this involved a lot. I think there was up to 30 policemen when this encounter happened, and back in 1975, and a triangle UFO basically floated right over the group of them, and then shot this light beam down right in the middle of them. And it's quite a story. That blog's up on. We just reissued that blog. Here's some paperwork on it, but check that out on podcastufo.com as well. It was just reposted last week. But another interesting sighting, and I would like to talk to you about historic police encounters. There's a lot of them. I'm sure you've looked into them.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did ask a website, YouTube, UFOB, if they could create a channel just for UFOs and police, and they did. And right now there are 27 well-known cases that they've placed, everything from Zamora out in New Mexico to the Exeter, New Hampshire incident.
Oh yeah.
All over the country, and they have not just over the United States, but all over the Europe as well. the Belgium case where you've got people,
Yep.
multiple officers. The 2000 St. Clair County, Illinois police sighting case where they're chasing the thing over multiple counties. You hear
Yeah.
dispatch handing off the job from one county to the other. And so it all leads to this conclusion that there have been many encounters, but from the part of the government, they have not given first responders the tools, the education, the training, the equipment that they would need in order to look to prevent negative encounters from occurring. So public safety being at the forefront of what law enforcement and other first responders should do, that would mean that they, whatever the government knows and whatever equipment they have that can help develop best practices for first responders that are answering the 911 calls from the general public to respond to these incidents, we need to develop those practices and policies and training and education as a country. It may be a model for the rest of the world to allow officers to not just be victims when they get to the scene and whatever the anomalous phenomenon that exists is happening, that they then become victims as well. And you go through the historical record, you could see officers getting injured and killed. The George Wheeler case in Pierce County, Wisconsin, 1976.
Right.
He got, I guess you could call it irradiated.
I think that car still lives somewhere in somewhere.
You're talking about the Val Johnson.
Oh yes, you're right. I
1979 Marshall County,
you're right.
Minnesota. Yeah, where
right.
he lost time, the whole thing.
Right.
So we have documentation, we have evidence of the symptoms of this. We have documentation of the physical injuries that individuals have had when they've encountered whatever it is that they're encountering, whether it's electromagnetic radiation or some other microwave. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. That's not my lane. I'm just a first responder, public safety, emergency planner. And what I see that should be the impetus of agencies like Department of Homeland Security and our law enforcement leaders is, what are we going to do now that we know that this information exists? How are we going to help our first responders? Certainly, we can't continue stigma and ridicule and then basically having a psych exam perhaps for those that are simply telling the truth with what they've encountered.
Now, let me ask you this: prior to 2017, did you give much thought to the topic, or if you did you just kind of pass it off as nothing?
Never gave any thought to the topic. And I was going to all these places doing the training. Again, Dugway, Proving Grounds, to do the bio training and Nevada test site, and I had not a clue. As a matter of fact, I even trained I trained emergency responders in what they call National Incident Management System, ICS, Incident Command System. I taught that to municipalities throughout the country. Never even, gave it a second thought that the company I worked for, SAIC, had some sort of connection, a possible connection to this, NHI and re-engineering, technology not from this earth. So,
Wow.
it's certainly, this is in the 1990s, 2000s into the early 2010s. So that all those things, I was just like everybody else, no interest, not really concerned. But now I am concerned because what I did about 2 months ago, I just did an informal survey. I reached out to all the state police and I just sent them emails inquiring, and also the top 5 police departments in all the states, and just asked them, what do you have in terms of policies or procedures dealing with sightings or contacts or abductions? And the answer was uniformly, no, nothing. We don't have anything relevant to what you're speaking about. And that's what I expected. And I got 25% response, but that's what I expected. Small agencies to large, they're not focused on this, and they may be waiting perhaps for direction and guidance from Homeland Security or Defense Department. That I think would be the logical thing for them to do. But as far as I'm concerned, we need to, collectively start putting our heads together and thinking about how we can better address this issue. And there are a couple of organizations that have developed to try and deal with the issue. UAP Med is UAP-Med is one of those organizations where they're trying to coalesce and get those in the medical and mental health community to help better the resources and better the efforts of those in that community to help deal with this issue. They don't provide medical or mental health services themselves, but they help to coordinate and get those efforts to help those who need those services to get that treatment they need. And I know that they have a web presence, UAP-Med, and I know that they are also interested in getting those in the medical and mental health community to work with them and to get some concrete best practices on how best to address the issues of everything from contacts to those who have been abducted, and how those disciplines can more appropriately deal with those issues. And I know Ted Rowe is the person who founded that organization. He also was instrumental in starting AIAA, which people know because of pilot Ryan Graves, who's a part of that.
Yeah.
And they're again focused on public safety. Folks are flying these planes, commercial flights, military flights, and they're dealing with stuff they don't understand that they're encountering. And if they are not getting any kind of helpful feedback from those who are responsible for their well-being, then they should rightfully be concerned and moving to change that.
Yeah.
And so the other thing there's an organization that started UAP-PD, some individuals out in New Mexico, officers in New Mexico, who have created an organization to help officers who have had encounters, and they are absolutely not going to talk to their colleagues or to family members or to anybody else about it because they're concerned about the negative consequences of doing so. And so UAP PD was set up to sort of help them tell their stories in a safe way that will not cause them any repercussions in a negative light.
Yeah.
So those are two really important efforts, but ultimately we're going to need those who are responsible in our government to create processes for reporting, guidance for those stakeholders who are responsible for responding to the general public to deal with those issues, and then we will have a way for scientists to get reliable data that is transparent and is uniform and covers not just certain areas but covers the entire country, and so that we can actually from that data perhaps get some headway.
Now, I had heard at one time that police stations all around the country were given MUFON's phone number, and also the one Pete in Davenport, NICAP, was given both of those phone numbers. And when I didn't know, when I had my encounter in 2007, I had no idea what to do. And the first thing that I thought to do was, I'm going to call the police. I had no idea there was anything online or anything like that. So when I called the police department, I said, this is not an emergency, but, there is this craft that just is flying right now toward Monterey. And I want to know, do other people see it? And she said, what is it? I said, well, it was a round disc. And, I guess it's a UFO. I don't, and so then she was totally sarcastic and she never said anything. She just put me on hold for about 20 minutes and I finally hung up and gave up. So that was, I would say, probably a typical reaction. I would think a police department or dispatcher may, you know, treat someone like. I'm not sure.
Well, let's look at what the guidance or directives they're given. The National UFO Reporting Center started in 1974. They've covered perhaps 150,000 sightings since that time, calls that they've gotten from the general public, referred to by 911 dispatch as well as law enforcement. But they don't go out to conduct investigations. They don't have any ability or resources to do that. So they're making the call, and where does it go? Well, it's with Newport. And then you have the MUFON, which was started in 1969, and they do have field investigators. They have a training program, 4,000 active members, 600 field investigators, and they work to filter out, hoaxes from the calls that they get. But that is still a private effort. And then for pilots, you have the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena. NARCAP started in 1999, Civilian Reporting Center focusing on aviation-related UAP incidents only. So you have those two major private efforts, voluntary efforts, and then you have also the NARCAP, which is the aviation version of it. When FAA, the guides that they have, direct pilots who encounter any kind of public safety issues or property damage from UAP encounters to contact the local police department once they land. Now, I just told you my informal survey shows that there's nothing that law enforcement has to deal with UAP encounters. And so when you look at the private efforts, where do they connect to in terms of government? And if there's no way for government to accurately account for all of these incidents that are being reported, then how are we able to get data that's reliable enough for scientists to work on? And so all of that needs to change, and government in whatever capacity it's going to do it. I would probably think Homeland Security, but it may be some other agency or agencies where they're able to get a reliable reporting system that includes utilizing the first responders, utilizing the commercial and the military pilots. I know the military is working on, they've got their own reporting system that they're putting together. But all of this has to be not just done in a formal way through government oversight and control, but it has to be collected and then shared with the general public, just as we do with crimes that occur every day with the FBI UCR reporting system. We need to have similar types of systems in place so we can understand the frequency of these events actually occurring.
Right.
Because we don't know. We have not a clue.
I bet you there's people in the government that are paying attention to this that would just hope the whole thing would go away. Somehow, like you mentioned, the Robertson panel, that was that effort back then. Maybe there's, we'll see what efforts are upcoming. Here's a question for you, as Dr. Richard asks, as a detective, do you think that visitors ever plant evidence to mislead UFO investigators? Interesting.
The real answer, the only answer I give is I have not a clue. And it relates to what I just said. about there not being an official governmental accounting for these encounters. But can I say that all the thousands of people, thousands, tens of thousands of people, the hundreds of thousands of reports that have occurred over the last 70 decades, that all of those individuals are making it up or having some sort of mental health crisis,
Yeah.
or some other, seeing a prosaic weather or balloon or some other excuse. Certainly, much in the air is can be explained prosaically, maybe
Yeah.
95% of it or more. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that other percentage
Yeah.
where you have like the five observables.
Yeah.
And those are the things that our government, the American government, has already stated exist. So if you're looking for disclosure in a more formal way of having an elected leader come up to a podium and saying, well, they're out there, we've had encounters. Well, yeah, that's fine, but you don't have to wait for that. You already had Defense Department leadership state through their uh, encounters with news media that yes, they do exist. The reports that they've created within the last few years had stated that there are things that exist. And what I heard somebody say recently that I thought was really um, relevant was that we don't have to say UAP, unidentified. It's simply that the government will not tell us what they are, that they do know what they are, but they're refusing to let us know. So they will call it unidentified. But whatever these, anomalous things are, and again, I have not a clue. I'm just a civilian activist, like many out there that may be watching this, and so I don't have any more information than anyone else about UAP. But I have a lot of information about law enforcement, and I think as we get more and more people from the various disciplines that historically have created a lot of stigma around the pursuit of this topic, as long as we have more and more credible people coming out and stating that this is something that we need to focus on as a society, I think it's going to sort of break away at that wall of stigma that does not allow many people in this country to seriously consider even talking about it.
Yeah.
And I know this is the case because of family members, friends. I don't talk to them about it unless they ask me, because of this stigma that exists where, they will not understand what I'm saying, or they'll think that I'm joking, or that it's, some sort of craziness.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Right. In my professional world, I have, as a fine art appraiser, antiques appraiser, something like that. I always try to be professional and be careful about talking about this subject. But I know I sent you a text today about how this happened last week. I was in a house down on Cape Cod, and the woman had some beautiful artwork. Plus, she had some really unusual glass. She's an artist herself and did these glass sculptures that were fantastic. And all of a sudden, she says to me, I think if aliens are visiting us, they're going to think these glass sculptures are interesting. So it kind of opened the door for me to, I said, it's funny you should say that. Did you hear about the hearing that happened recently? She goes, I watched the whole thing. I was glued to my seat. And I said, I was there. So, we got into this great conversation. Now, she's a mathematician that worked consulting through all these companies, a brilliant, brilliant lady. And her husband is also, and they both were very intrigued. And I think it's a great time because these people in all walks of life and all types of jobs that they did or do or whatever, all are taking a look now. It's getting, if anything, if everything else fails, at least we have people paying attention to it.
Well, what we really need to pay attention to collectively are efforts to dissuade us or divert us from talking about this issue. I am concerned that those same rogue elements in government and private industry that are responsible for us getting to this point of not knowing much or if anything about this, that they're still pretty much doing what they're doing. And when I saw what happened with Mr. Grush
Rush,
regarding
yeah.
Grush,
Mhm.
regarding the police reports, the
Yes.
specific police reports, certainly they were quote unquote publicly available, but there was a little help from, folks within IC or DOD to help guide that reporter to those specific, documents.
Yeah,
So
those specific
it.
dates and places, because supposedly the name would have been redacted. They wouldn't have availability to that. So they had to know the incidents.
And I don't even think it was to embarrass him because he had already warned in the hearing that it was going to happen. What I think and what most people, rationally speaking would think is that it's a message to any future whistleblowers to
Yes.
discourage them.
That's the very, very, very first thing I said. I said, this has one goal, and that is to discourage anyone else from coming forward. When I first saw that. And I felt that all along. I sent that out to Ross Colhart immediately and Bryce Zabel, and just my thoughts on it.
What I do for folks that are not ready to talk about non-human intelligence, don't think about it. Just think about it as a big scandal involving a lot of money, and rogue program spending Congress wasn't even aware of, and so that's like government gone wrong. And so if you think of it as a big scandal and don't think about the non-human intelligence, then you're not going to be affected when people try to distract you talking about little green men,
right?
Or surveying their constituents about. Do you think that looking into little green men is a waste of time? No, forget that. Just follow the money. That's what
exactly right.
Should be worried about.
That's what they'll get their answers. The time flew by. I knew it would. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Hope to have you back one day.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. So we'll be back next week, and I don't know with who. I'm going to be at the MUFON Symposium. I'm going to pick someone out and do a show, or a couple of people out and do a show together. We'll see what happens. So we'll see you then next week. Remember to keep your eyes to the sky. That was the wrong one.